When the tall black man in tattered clothes entered the Silvercrest Hotel, security couldn't remove him fast enough. "This hotel belongs to me," he said without emotion, eyes fixed on a legacy stolen decades ago. They mocked him, threw him into the rain, warned him never to return. But Elijah Carter had survived worse than ridicule. 15 years in prison on fabricated charges, 30 years on streets that weren't meant to be his home. What the Kavanaugh dynasty never understood. His patience wasn't weakness, it was a weapon. As their empire of fraud and racial theft unravels, one truth becomes undeniable. The man they erased from history has returned to write its final chapter. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Rain pounded against the tall windows of the Silvercrest Hotel, the torrential downpour matching the fury of the wind that howled through the city streets. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the luxurious lobby where well-dressed guests mingled, sipping champagne and enjoying the warmth that money could buy. The massive oak doors swung open suddenly, letting in a gust of wind and rain. The cheerful chatter stopped as heads turned toward the entrance. Standing there, dripping wet and looking drastically out of place, was a tall black man with tattered clothes. His face was weathered by years on the street, but his eyes, those eyes were something else entirely. They carried a piercing intensity that seemed to cut through the superficial glamour of the hotel. The security guard stationed by the door immediately tensed, hand moving to his radio. The guests nearest the entrance stepped back, some wrinkling their noses in disgust, others whispering behind manicured hands. It was as if someone had opened a door to another world, one they preferred to pretend didn't exist in their city. The homeless man didn't seem bothered by their reactions. He walked forward with surprising dignity, his worn boots leaving wet footprints on the marble floor. An old burlap sack hung over his shoulder, its contents hidden but clearly precious to him by the way he gripped it. "Excuse me," called out the front desk clerk, a young white woman with perfectly styled blonde hair. "Sir, you can't be in here." Her voice was tight with forced politeness. The man continued walking, his eyes scanning the lobby as if looking for something or someone. The hotel manager, Mr. Langley, emerged from his office at the commotion. He was in his 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the perpetual look of someone who considered himself better than most. His tailored suit projected authority as he strode across the lobby. "Is there a problem here?" Langley asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. The homeless man turned to face him. "No problem," he said, his voice unexpectedly, deep and clear. "I'm just here to claim what's mine." Langley's eyebrows shot up. "I beg your pardon." "This hotel," the man said simply. "It belongs to me." There was a beat of silence before Langley burst into laughter. Several guests joined in, their tittering spreading across the lobby like wildfire. "Well, that's certainly a new approach," Langley said, amusement dripping from his words. "Usually the homeless just ask for spare change, not the entire building." The man didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady on Langley's face, unwavering despite the mockery. "Call security," Langley said to the clerk, who quickly picked up the phone. Within moments, a burly security guard named Bradley appeared. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a military-style haircut, his uniform stretched tight across his chest. "What seems to be the issue, Mr. Langley?" Bradley asked, eyeing the homeless man with obvious contempt. "This gentleman," Langley said, with exaggerated courtesy, "believes he owns the Silvercrest. Would you kindly show him out?" Bradley stepped forward, grabbing the man's arm. "Come on, old-timer. We don't do handouts here." The homeless man didn't resist, but he didn't move either. Instead, he slowly reached into his worn sack, causing Bradley to tense. But rather than a weapon, the man pulled out an aged yellow document, the edges frayed and delicate with time. "Check your records," the man said calmly, holding out the paper. "My name is Elijah Carter. This hotel stands on land that belongs to me." Langley's smile turned cold as he snatched the document from Elijah's hand. He glanced at it briefly before letting out another laugh, louder than before. "You must be joking," he announced for everyone to hear. "A man like you could never own a place like this." He emphasized the word "you" with such disdain that his meaning was unmistakable. A black homeless man could never have a legitimate claim to such wealth. The guests murmured their agreement, some shaking their heads at the audacity of the claim. But among the staff watching from the sidelines, not everyone was convinced. Amanda Williams, a young black woman who worked as a receptionist, observed the scene with growing unease. There was something about the old man's confidence that didn't match that of a typical scammer or mentally ill person seeking shelter. Bradley tightened his grip on Elijah's arm. "Let's go, buddy. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As they began to drag him toward the exit, a young Latino staff member named Diego Martinez quickly pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the document that Langley had tossed aside on the reception desk. He slipped the phone back into his pocket before anyone noticed. Elijah didn't struggle as Bradley and another security guard physically removed him from the premises. They pushed him out into the rain with enough force to send him stumbling down the steps. He fell to his knees on the wet pavement, his sack tumbling beside him. The guards stood watching from the doorway, making sure he wouldn't try to come back in. One of them laughed and said something to the other, both of them turning to head back inside. Elijah slowly got to his feet, gathering his sack and holding it close to his chest to protect it from the rain. He looked up at the magnificent building, water streaming down his face, but there was no defeat in his expression, only certainty and perhaps a touch of pity for those inside. Before walking away, he locked eyes with Langley, who stood smugly in the doorway. "You laughed," Elijah said, his voice carrying despite the rain. "You won't be laughing for long." Langley rolled his eyes and turned away, closing the door on the homeless man and the storm. Inside, the hotel quickly returned to normal. Glasses clinked, laughter resumed, and the brief interruption was dismissed as nothing more than an amusing anecdote to share later. That night, long after his shift had ended, Diego sat in his small apartment, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone screen. He zoomed in on the photo of the document he'd taken earlier. As he read the faded text, his expression changed from curiosity to shock. With trembling fingers, he sent a text message to Amanda. "You won't believe this." Amanda's phone buzzed as she was getting ready for bed. Diego wasn't someone who texted her often, and certainly not at this hour. She opened the message, frowning at the cryptic words. Before she could reply, another message came through. A photograph of the document the homeless man had presented. It was barely legible in the phone image, but she could make out what appeared to be a land deed from decades ago. And there it was. The name Elijah Carter, alongside another name she couldn't quite make out. "Is this real?" she texted back. "I think so," Diego replied. "Going to dig deeper tomorrow." Amanda stared at her phone for a long moment. Something about the old man's demeanor had struck her. The dignity, the certainty, not the behavior of someone making false claims. "Be careful," she texted. "See you tomorrow." She slept poorly that night, dreams filled with piercing eyes and rain-soaked documents. The next evening, Amanda stayed late after her shift ended. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving the vast hotel eerily quiet except for the night crew. She made her way to the small office where they kept older records, files that hadn't yet been digitized. The room was dusty and cramped, with filing cabinets lining the walls and boxes stacked in corners. Amanda wasn't sure exactly what she was looking for, but she knew she had to start somewhere. She began with property records from the 1970s, when the hotel was first built. Hours passed as she dug through yellowed papers and faded photographs. Her back ached from hunching over files, but then she found something. A newspaper article from 1975 announcing the development of a luxury hotel. It mentioned two business partners, Bennett Kavanaugh and Elijah Carter, described as a rising entrepreneur. Amanda sat back in her chair, heart pounding. The homeless man hadn't been lying, at least not entirely. Elijah Carter had been connected to the hotel's beginnings. Digging further, Amanda found more mentions of Carter in documents from the mid-70s, but then, mysteriously, his name disappeared from the records around 1987. From that point on, only Bennett Kavanaugh was listed as the owner, and later, his son Jonathan, who currently ran the hotel. Amanda was so engrossed in her search that she nearly jumped out of her skin when her phone buzzed. It was another text from Diego. "Someone's following me. I have more pictures. We'll try to send..." The message cut off abruptly. Amanda texted back immediately. "Diego? Are you okay?" No response. She tried calling, but the call went straight to voicemail. A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the office's aggressive air conditioning. Amanda gathered the most important documents she'd found, making quick copies on the ancient copier in the corner. She slipped them into her bag and left the records room, locking it behind her. The next morning, Amanda arrived for her shift early, hoping to catch Diego before work started. But he wasn't at his usual station. When she asked another staff member about him, the woman just shrugged. He didn't show up. Manager's pissed. Said if he doesn't call in, he's fired. A knot formed in Amanda's stomach. She tried Diego's phone. Again, still straight to voicemail. During her lunch break, Amanda made a decision. She took a taxi to Diego's apartment building, a modest complex on the other side of town. She knocked on his door repeatedly, but there was no answer. A neighbor poked his head out of an adjacent apartment. "You looking for the guy in 3B? Haven't seen him since yesterday." "Did you notice anything unusual?" Amanda asked. "Anyone hanging around who didn't belong?" The neighbor thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, there was a black SUV parked outside most of yesterday. Not from around here." Amanda thanked him and left, the knot in her stomach tightening. When she returned to the hotel, she went straight to her station at the reception desk, trying to act normal despite her racing thoughts. As she settled in, she bumped her knee against the underside of the desk and felt something stuck there. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she reached under the desk and found a small folded note taped to the bottom. She peeled it off and discreetly opened it under the counter. Written in neat block letters were the words, "Some things are meant to stay buried." Amanda's hands trembled as she quickly refolded the note and slipped it into her pocket. Someone knew she was looking into Elijah Carter's claims, and that someone was watching her. Throughout her shift, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Each time the lobby doors opened, she flinched, half expecting to see men in suits coming for her. But her day passed uneventfully, at least on the surface. That evening, Amanda made a decision. The hotel had a rarely used attic where the oldest records were stored, files deemed too unimportant to keep accessible but too significant to throw away. If there was any evidence of what had happened between Elijah Carter and Bennett Kavanaugh, it would be there. The attic was accessed through a narrow staircase in the service area of the hotel. Amanda waited until most of the staff had left before making her move. She took the service elevator to the top floor, then slipped into the stairwell that led to the attic. The space was dark and musty, illuminated only by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Amanda pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. Function, sweeping it across rows of shelves and boxes. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust. Clearly, no one had been up here in years. She started with the boxes labeled 1980s, figuring that would be the period when Elijah Carter vanished from the records. Most contained mundane operational documents, budget reports, employee records, maintenance logs. But in a box labeled Legal Affairs 1985-1989, Amanda found what she was looking for. It was a property deed from 1976, showing both Elijah Carter and Bennett Kavanaugh as co-owners of the land where the Silver Crest now stood. Unlike the records downstairs, this document hadn't been altered. Elijah Carter's name was still there, plain as day. Amanda's hands shook as she used her phone to take photos of the deed. This was proof that the homeless man's claims had merit. But proof of what, exactly? What had happened to make Elijah Carter disappear from later records? As Amanda was about to put the document back, the work phone in her pocket rang, startling her so badly she nearly dropped it. The caller ID showed the hotel's main number. Cautiously, she answered. "Hello?" "Walk away," said a deep voice she didn't recognize. "You don't want to end up like Diego." The line went dead. Amanda stood frozen in the attic, heart hammering against her ribs. The threat couldn't have been clearer. She quickly gathered the documents she'd found, took photos of anything that seemed relevant, and hurried back to the stairwell. As she descended the stairs, she nearly collided with James Wilson, the head of security. He was a tall, imposing man with a permanently stern expression. "Working late, Amanda?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Just finishing up some filing," she lied, clutching her bag tightly. James nodded slowly. "Be careful in those old stairwells. Easy to have an accident when no one's around." The implied threat made Amanda's blood run cold, but she maintained her composure. "I'll be careful. Good night, James." She walked away, feeling his eyes boring into her back. What Amanda didn't know was that her activities had already been reported to Jonathan Kavanaugh, the current owner of the Silver Crest and son of Bennett Kavanaugh. In his penthouse office, at the top of the hotel, Jonathan sat behind a desk of polished mahogany, listening as James described Amanda's suspicious behavior. "She's digging," James concluded, "and she's been in contact with Diego before he decided to leave town." Jonathan Kavanaugh was in his 40s, with the same silver-streaked dark hair his father had once had. His face might have been handsome, if not for the coldness in his eyes. "Make sure she doesn't get too curious," Jonathan said, swirling the bourbon in his glass. "We can't afford complications right now, not with the anniversary gala coming up." "Understood, sir," James replied. "And the homeless man?" Jonathan's expression darkened. "Find him. Find out what he knows, who he's talked to. Then make sure he's no longer a problem." James nodded and left the office, leaving Jonathan alone with his thoughts. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out an old photograph, a picture of his father standing in front of the Silver Crest on its opening day. Bennett Kavanaugh stood proud and alone, as if the hotel had always been his and his alone. Jonathan slipped the photo back into the drawer. Whatever had happened in the past would stay buried. He would make sure of it. Meanwhile, Amanda had made a decision. She needed to find Elijah Carter before Kavanaugh's men did. Using the photo of the deed and some basic internet searches, she had pieced together a rough history of the man who claimed to own the Silver Crest. Elijah Carter had indeed been a businessman in the 1970s, with investments in several properties around the city. Then, in 1987, he had seemingly vanished from public life. There were no recent records of him anywhere, no address, no social security benefits, nothing to indicate what had happened to him after his disappearance from the hotel's records. Amanda started with the obvious places: homeless shelters, soup kitchens, community centers that served the unhoused population. Most turned up nothing, but at a small church that offered meals on weekends, an elderly volunteer remembered Elijah. "Tall fellow, keeps to himself, carries an old sack?" "Yes, he comes by sometimes, but never stays long. Proud man, that one." "Do you know where I might find him?" Amanda asked. The volunteer hesitated, eyeing Amanda suspiciously. "Why are you looking for him? He in some kind of trouble?" "No," Amanda assured her. "Actually, I think he might have been wronged a long time ago. I want to help him." The volunteer studied Amanda's face, then nodded slowly. "There's an alleyway near the old Marshall building. He sometimes stays there. But be careful. He doesn't trust easily." Amanda thanked her and left, hope mixing with apprehension in her chest. Night was falling as she made her way to the location the volunteer had mentioned. The streets grew quieter and less welcoming as she walked, the gleaming skyscrapers of downtown giving way to neglected buildings and empty lots. The alleyway was narrow and dimly lit, wedged between an abandoned warehouse and a pawn shop with bars on its windows. Amanda hesitated at the entrance, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. "You found the truth, didn't you?" The voice came from the shadows, causing Amanda to start. She peered into the darkness and saw a figure seated on a makeshift bed of cardboard and blankets. As her eyes adjusted, she recognized Elijah Carter. Up close, without the rain and the chaos of the hotel lobby, she could see the intelligence in his eyes, the dignity in his posture despite his circumstances. This was not a man broken by life, but one who had endured and waited. "Mr. Carter?" Amanda said, stepping closer. My name is Amanda Williams. I work at the Silver Crest. I remember you, Elijah said. You were watching, not laughing like the others. Amanda nodded, unsure how to proceed. I found some documents about you and Bennett Kavanaugh, about the hotel. Elijah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, a sudden alertness, like a predator sensing prey. Then you know I wasn't lying, he said. I know your name was on the original deed, Amanda replied. What I don't know is what happened after. Elijah gestured to the space beside him. Sit, if you want to hear the story. It's not a short one. Amanda hesitated only briefly before sitting down on the edge of the cardboard. Around them, the city hummed with distant traffic and muffled voices. Above, between the tall buildings, a few stars managed to shine through the urban glow. I've been waiting a long time to tell someone who would listen, Elijah said, his deep voice barely above a whisper. A very long time. And as night settled fully over the city, Elijah Carter began to tell Amanda Williams the story of how he had lost everything, and why, after all these years, he had come back to reclaim it. Little did they know, they were being watched from the shadows. A figure stood at the far end of the alley, phone to ear, reporting their location to Jonathan Kavanaugh. The alleyway remained silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren wailing in the night. A single streetlight at the entrance cast long shadows, its bulb flickering as if struggling to stay alive. Amanda sat beside Elijah, waiting as he gathered his thoughts. His weathered hands rested on the worn burlap sack in his lap, the same one he'd carried into the hotel. I wasn't always like this, Elijah began, his deep voice steady despite the cold. In the 70s, I had everything a man could want. A beautiful wife, a daughter in college, and a growing business. Amanda listened intently as Elijah's eyes seemed to look back through time, seeing a different world. I started with nothing, he continued. My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses, but they believed in education. I worked my way through college, started investing in real estate when banks wouldn't give most black folks the time of day. He shifted, sitting up straighter as pride momentarily replaced the weariness in his expression. By 1975, I had enough capital to partner with Bennett Kavanaugh on a major project, the Silver Crest Hotel. Bennett had the connections, I had the vision and additional funding. We were going to create the finest hotel in the city. So what happened? Amanda asked softly. Elijah's face darkened. Bennett couldn't stand that I was his equal. He wanted a silent partner who'd stay in the background, not a black man with his name on the deed and his face at the groundbreaking ceremonies. A bitter smile crossed Elijah's face. But I wasn't going to hide. This was my achievement too. I earned it. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. In 1987, Bennett made his move. He fabricated financial records, making it look like I'd been embezzling from our company accounts. The police showed up at my house in the middle of the night. They dragged me out in handcuffs while my wife watched. Amanda's hand went to her mouth. That's horrible. The justice system wasn't kind to black men then. Still isn't. Elijah's voice remained even, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his sack. My assets were frozen. The high-priced lawyer I hired turned out to be Bennett's golf buddy. The jury saw exactly what they expected to see. A guilty black man reaching above his station. Elijah fell silent for a moment, his eyes focused on something far away. I got 15 years. My wife couldn't handle the shame. She moved away, changed her name. My daughter, his voice finally cracked. She believed I was guilty for years. By the time I got out, Bennett had erased me from every record. The hotel, our other properties, everything was in his name alone. But you kept the deed, Amanda said, nodding toward his sack. The original, yes. My wife had hidden it before she left. It was the only thing waiting for me when I got out in 2002. Elijah carefully opened his sack and pulled out the same yellowed document he'd shown at the hotel. This is my proof. This and other evidence I've gathered over the years. What kind of evidence? Elijah started to answer but suddenly tensed, his head turning sharply toward the entrance of the alley. Someone's watching us, he whispered. Amanda turned to look, but saw only shadows. "We need to move," Elijah said, already gathering his few possessions. "They've found us." "Who's found us?" Amanda asked, but Elijah was already standing, guiding her deeper into the alley. "Kavanaugh's men. They've been following me for days. Now they're following you too." They slipped through a narrow gap between buildings, emerging onto a quieter street. Elijah moved with surprising speed and agility for a man his age, leading Amanda through a maze of back streets. "Where are we going?" she asked, struggling to keep up. "Somewhere safe," was all he said. After 20 minutes of navigating the urban labyrinth, they arrived at an abandoned community center. Elijah produced a key and unlocked a side door. "How do you have a key to this place?" Amanda asked as they entered. "I used to fund this center back in the day," Elijah replied, his voice tinged with pride and sorrow. "They closed it down years ago, but they never changed the locks." Inside, the building was dusty but intact. Elijah led her to a small office in the back, where a camping lantern provided dim light. "We'll be safe here for a while," he said, setting down his sack. "I've never brought anyone here before." Amanda's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to see a text from an unknown number. "Your friend Diego says hello from Mexico. Quit while you're ahead." Her blood ran cold. "They're threatening me now," she said, showing Elijah the message. "They're getting desperate," Elijah said grimly. "That means we're onto something they don't want found." "Diego didn't go to Mexico," Amanda said. "Something happened to him, just like they're threatening will happen to me." Elijah nodded solemnly. "Bennett Kavanaugh's son is just like his father, willing to do anything to protect what they stole." "I should go home, get some things if we're hiding out," Amanda said. Elijah looked troubled. "It might not be safe. I'll be quick. They don't know I've met with you yet." She stood up, straightening her shoulders. "I need to get my laptop and some changes of clothes if we're going to figure this out." Reluctantly, Elijah agreed. "Be careful, and if anything seems wrong, don't go inside. Just come back here." Amanda took a taxi to her apartment building, constantly checking to make sure she wasn't followed. Her street looked normal, her building quiet. Maybe she was being paranoid after all. That sense of security evaporated the moment she opened her apartment door. Every drawer had been pulled out, contents dumped on the floor. Her mattress was slashed, furniture overturned. On the wall above her bed, scrawled in what looked like red marker, were the words, "Walk away." Amanda stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding. Then, forcing herself to focus, she grabbed a backpack and stuffed it with whatever clothes remained, intact. She grabbed her laptop from its hiding place in a hollowed-out book on her shelf, thankfully overlooked by the intruders, and fled. Back at the community center, Elijah listened grimly as Amanda described what she'd found. "Jonathan Kavanaugh is getting worried," he said. "He knows we're close to exposing him." He reached into his sack and pulled out a small notebook. "This is why." "What is it?" Amanda asked, taking the notebook. "For years after I got out of prison, I lived on the streets watching the Silver Crest from a distance. I saw things, shady meetings, bribes changing hands. I wrote everything down, waiting for the right moment." Amanda flipped through the notebook, filled with dates, times, and detailed observations written in neat, precise handwriting. "This isn't enough on its own," Elijah admitted. "But combined with the deed and other evidence I've gathered, it starts to build a case." "What other evidence?" Amanda asked. Before Elijah could answer, they heard the sound of vehicles pulling up outside. "They've found us," Elijah said, quickly returning the notebook to his sack. "We need to go. Now." They slipped out the back door just as flashlight beams swept through the front windows. In the distance, Amanda could make out a black SUV, the same one described by Diego's neighbor. "This way," Elijah whispered, leading her behind the building, toward a chain-link fence. As they reached the fence, a car engine roared to life nearby. Headlights swept across them as a sedan accelerated in their direction. "Run!" Elijah shouted, pushing Amanda toward the fence. She scrambled over it, Elijah right behind her despite his age. The car screeched to a halt at the fence, and two men jumped out, shouting at them to stop. Elijah led Amanda to a maze of shipping containers behind a nearby warehouse. As they ducked between the metal giants, Elijah suddenly veered left, approaching a parked car. "What are you doing?" Amanda hissed. Without answering, Elijah ducked under the car and did something she couldn't see. When he emerged, he was holding several disconnected wires. "They won't be using this one to follow us," he said with grim satisfaction. "Come on." They continued running until they reached a busy street, where Elijah hailed a cab. As they pulled away, Amanda saw the men who had been chasing them emerge from the shipping containers, looking furious. "How did you know to disable that car?" Amanda asked once they were safely moving through traffic. "I was a mechanic in prison," Elijah said simply. "Learned a few things." The cab dropped them at a small motel on the outskirts of town. Elijah paid cash for a room, and they settled in for the night, both too wired to sleep. "There's something else," Elijah said after a long silence. "Something that could bring down Jonathan Kavanaugh for good." Amanda leaned forward. "What is it?" "Bennett. Kavanaugh kept a ledger, a secret accounting book detailing every corrupt deal, every stolen asset." Elijah's eyes gleamed in the dim motel room light. "Including proof that he framed me." "You have this ledger?" Amanda asked. Elijah shook his head. "Not yet, but I know where it is. Hidden in a safe in Bennett's old office, now Jonathan's private study at the hotel." "How do you know about it?" "Bennett's assistant told me years ago after Bennett died. She'd seen it but was too afraid to come forward." Elijah's expression grew solemn. "She died last year. Cancer. Made me promise to finish what she started, exposing the truth." Amanda took a deep breath. "So we need to get into Jonathan Kavanaugh's private office and find a ledger that might not even exist anymore." "That's right," Elijah said, a hint of a smile on his weathered face. "Think you're up for it?" Despite everything, the dangers, the threats, her ransacked apartment, Amanda found herself nodding. "Yes, I am." Outside their motel room, a car pulled into the parking lot, its headlights briefly illuminating the window before going dark. Morning light filtered through the cheap motel curtains, waking Amanda from a fitful sleep. She sat up quickly, momentarily disoriented before remembering the events of the previous day. Elijah was already awake, sitting in a chair by the window, watching the parking lot. "The car from last night is gone," he said without turning around. "But they'll be looking for us." Amanda checked her phone. 3 missed calls from the hotel. She was officially late for work. There was also a text from an unfamiliar number. "Footage from lobby shows you talking to the homeless man. Final warning." She showed it to Elijah, who nodded grimly. "We're running out of time." "What's our plan?" Amanda asked, running her fingers through her tangled hair. "We need allies," Elijah said. "People who can help us get to that ledger." Amanda thought for a moment, then opened her laptop. "I might know someone," she said, typing quickly. "Carl Taylor, the night janitor at the hotel. He's worked there for decades, since before the Kavanaughs took over completely." "Can he be trusted?" Elijah asked. "I think so. He's never seemed to like Langley or the Kavanaughs much, always muttering about how things used to be better." While Amanda contacted Carl, Elijah turned on the small motel television. A local news program was covering a charity gala scheduled at the Silver Crest that evening, hosted by Jonathan Kavanaugh himself. "Every year, he throws this party to celebrate his family's legacy," Elijah said, his voice bitter. "Using my hotel to boost his reputation while I lived on the streets." Amanda looked up from her laptop. "Carl's willing to help us. He says there's something we should see. Records in the hotel basement that never made it to the regular archives." "When can we meet him?" "Tonight during the gala. Everyone will be distracted by the event." Elijah smiled for the first time since Amanda had met him. "Perfect. While Jonathan parades around playing the benevolent businessman, we'll be uncovering the truth about his family." They spent the day preparing, with Amanda using her laptop to research the Kavanaugh family's history more thoroughly. What she found was troubling, a pattern of acquiring properties from minority owners throughout the city, often under suspicious circumstances. The Silver Crest wasn't an isolated incident, she told Elijah. The Kavanaughs have been doing this for generations. As evening approached, they disguised themselves as best they could. Amanda wore a blonde wig she'd purchased from a nearby shop, while Elijah shaved his gray beard and donned a service worker's uniform that Carl had provided. They arrived at the hotel separately, with Amanda entering through a service entrance, where Carl was waiting. The elderly janitor led them through back corridors, carefully avoiding security cameras. "I've worked here for 42 years, Carl said as they descended a rarely used staircase. "Seen 3 generations of Kavanaughs come and go, never trusted any of them." "Did you know Elijah back then?" Amanda asked. Carl nodded. "Everyone knew Mr. Carter. He was a good man, treated the staff with respect, not like Bennett Kavanaugh." He glanced at Elijah. "I never believed what they said about you, sir." Elijah's eyes softened. "Thank you, Carl. That means a lot." The basement of the Silver Crest was vast and labyrinthine, with sections that predated the hotel itself. Carl led them to an old record room that had been converted to storage, pulling a key from his pocket. "They think I just keep cleaning supplies in here," he said with a wink, unlocking the door. "But I've been collecting things over the years, things they thought they'd destroyed." Inside, boxes lined the shelves, each labeled meticulously with dates and categories. Carl pointed to one marked 1987, police reports. "That's where I'd start," he said. "I need to get back upstairs before they notice I'm gone. Good luck." After Carl left, Amanda and Elijah quickly opened the box. Inside were copies of police reports related to Elijah's case, but many sections had been redacted with thick black marker. "They were thorough," Elijah muttered, flipping through page after page of censored information. One report, however, caught Amanda's attention. It mentioned a witness who was prepared to testify on Elijah's behalf, stating that the financial records had been falsified. But a handwritten note in the margin stated, "Witness unavailable, relocated out of state." "They silenced your witness," Amanda said. "Just like they tried to silence Diego," Elijah replied, his expression grim. They continued searching until Amanda found something else, a private investigator's report commissioned by Bennett Kavanaugh just before Elijah's arrest. "Look at this," she said, handing it to Elijah. "Bennett was having you followed for months. He was planning this all along." Elijah's hands trembled slightly as he read the report. "All these years, I thought maybe I'd missed something, some warning sign. But he was always planning to betray me." As they continued their search, the sound of music and laughter filtered down from above. The gala was in full swing, with the city's elite gathering to celebrate the Kavanaugh family legacy. Suddenly, the door opened. Amanda and Elijah froze, expecting Carl, but instead, Langley stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "I knew something was going on," he snarled, reaching for his radio. "Security, I need—" Before he could finish, Carl appeared behind him, swinging a mop handle that connected with the back of Langley's head. The manager crumpled to the floor, unconscious. "Sorry I'm late," Carl said, breathing heavily. "Saw him heading this way on the security monitors." "We need to move fast," Elijah said, gathering the most important documents. "Langley will be missed soon." "What about the ledger?" Amanda asked. "It's our only chance of proving anything definitively," Elijah replied. "We need to get to Jonathan's office." Carl hesitated. "That's on the top floor, heavily secured. You'll never make it past the guards." "I might," Amanda said, an idea forming. "The gala is happening right now. Jonathan will be downstairs with the guests." "Too risky," Elijah argued. "Not if I go alone," Amanda insisted. "I still have my staff key card. If anyone stops me, I'll say I'm working late." After a heated debate, they agreed Amanda would try to access Jonathan's office while Elijah and Carl secured their exit route through the service area. Amanda made her way upstairs, heart pounding with each step. The sounds of the gala grew louder as she passed the grand ballroom, then faded again as she ascended to the executive level. As expected, the security desk outside Jonathan's office was empty. The guard had likely been reassigned to the gala. Amanda swiped her card, holding her breath until the light turned green and the door unlocked. Jonathan's office was opulent, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Amanda moved quickly to the large painting behind his desk, the typical place for a wall safe in such offices. Sure enough, moving the painting revealed a modern electronic safe. Of course it has a code, she muttered to herself. She tried several combinations, Jonathan's birthday, the hotel's founding date, all without success. Then she remembered something Carl had mentioned, 3 generations of Kavanaughs. She tried Bennett's birth year, 1940, nothing. Then she tried an earlier date, 1915, the birth year of Bennett's father, the first Kavanaugh to establish the family fortune. The safe beeped and swung open. Inside were documents, cash, and a leather-bound book that looked decades old. Amanda grabbed the book, flipping it open to confirm it was the ledger Elijah had described. Pages of handwritten entries detailed transactions, bribes, and notes, including several explicit mentions of the plot against Elijah Carter. One entry from April 1987 read, "Paid Wilson $15,000 to forge financial records for Carter case, worth every penny to remove him permanently." Amanda quickly took photos of the most damning pages, then tucked the ledger into her bag. As she closed the safe and replaced the painting, the office door opened. Jonathan Kavanaugh stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to cold fury as he recognized Amanda despite her disguise. "I thought there was a rat in my hotel," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "What a disappointment that it's you, Amanda." Amanda backed away, clutching her bag. "I know what your father did to Elijah Carter," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I know you've continued his legacy of theft and corruption." Jonathan smiled, a chilling expression that never reached his eyes. "And who's going to believe you? A hotel receptionist and a homeless man against the Kavanaugh family? This city was built by people like us." "You mean people who steal from others? Who ruin lives for profit?" Amanda's fear was giving way to anger. "The ledger tells the whole story." For the first time, Jonathan's confidence faltered. "What ledger?" "Your father's secret accounting book. The one that details how he framed Elijah Carter, how he bribed officials, how he built this hotel on lies." Jonathan lunged forward, reaching for her bag. Amanda dodged, but he grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully. "Give it to me," he hissed. The office door burst open again, and Elijah stood in the doorway, with Carl right behind him. "Let her go." "Jonathan," Elijah commanded, his voice as powerful as it had been decades earlier when he was a respected businessman. Jonathan's grip tightened on Amanda's arm. "You ruined everything, old man. Coming back here, stirring up the past." "The past never left," Elijah said, stepping forward. "It's been waiting for justice." Amanda used Jonathan's momentary distraction to wrench free, stumbling away from him. "I have it all," she said, pulling out her phone. "And I've already sent copies of the ledger to a secure email." Jonathan's face contorted with rage. "Security," he shouted. "Security to my office now." "They're busy with an incident downstairs," Carl said with a sly smile. "Someone pulled the fire alarm. The gala is in chaos." Elijah moved to Amanda's side, facing Jonathan across the desk that had once been his partner's. "It's over, Jonathan. Your father stole my life, my reputation, my future. You won't get away with it, too." "You have nothing," Jonathan sneered, though his voice lacked conviction. "My lawyers will bury you." "Not this time," Amanda said, scrolling through her phone. "Look." She turned the screen toward Jonathan, showing a message from an unknown number, Diego's number. It read, "Safe," and talking to reporter Banks, sending him everything. Jonathan's face paled. Frank Banks was a notorious investigative journalist who had been trying to find dirt on the Kavanaugh family for years. "Diego's alive?" Amanda asked, hope in her voice. "And talking to the press," Elijah added, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "You thought you could bury the truth forever, but you were wrong." The sound of approaching footsteps signaled security was finally responding to Jonathan's call. Elijah grabbed Amanda's arm. "We need to go. Now!" They hurried from the office, with Carl leading them down a service corridor. Behind them, they could hear Jonathan shouting orders to find them, to stop them at any cost. They had the ledger. They had the evidence. But they were still in danger. As they burst through a side exit into the cool night air, Amanda's phone buzzed with another message from Diego. "Meet at the dock warehouse. Banks is waiting." They hailed a taxi, constantly checking to ensure they weren't followed. Amanda glanced at Elijah, seeing not a homeless man but a dignified businessman reclaiming his rightful legacy. "We did it," she whispered. "We found the proof." Elijah's eyes were fixed on the hotel as it receded in the distance, its illuminated sign glowing against the night sky. "Not yet," he said quietly, "but we're close. Closer than I've been in 30 years. Behind them, lights flashed as police cars pulled up to the Silver Crest. The final showdown was just beginning. The taxi sped through the nighttime streets, weaving through late-night traffic as Amanda kept glancing nervously out the rear window. Beside her, Elijah sat still as stone, the ledger clutched tightly in his weathered hands. Carl had gone his separate way, promising to meet them later. "Too dangerous for all of us to travel together," he'd insisted. Amanda's phone buzzed again. She looked down, expecting another message from Diego. Instead, what she saw made her blood run cold. An unknown number had sent a photo, a blurry image of a man tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. Though his face was partially obscured, she recognized Diego immediately. Below the image was a simple message. "He's still alive, but not for long." "Elijah," she whispered, showing him the phone. His expression hardened as he studied the image. "It's a trap." "But what if they really have him?" Amanda pressed, fear evident in her voice. "We can't just abandon him." "That's exactly what they want," Elijah replied, his voice low and measured. "To lure us out where they can take the ledger and eliminate all witnesses." The taxi pulled up a few blocks from their intended destination, another precaution Elijah had insisted on. As they paid and stepped out into the cold night air, Amanda couldn't shake the image of Diego from her mind. "Something doesn't add up," she said as they walked, keeping to the shadows between streetlights. If that last text really came from Diego, how could they also be holding him? Elijah nodded grimly. "Someone's lying. Question is, which message is the trap?" Amanda stopped suddenly, a realization hitting her. "We need to know who leaked our location at the hotel. How did Jonathan know to come up to his office while I was there?" "Good question," Elijah conceded. "We trusted Carl, but—" "I'm not sure it was Carl," Amanda said, pulling out her phone and quickly navigating through files. "Before everything went crazy, I made a copy of the security footage from today. Let me check something." She opened a video file, fast-forwarding to the hours before the gala. In the silent footage, she could see herself speaking briefly with Elijah in a quiet corner of the lobby, then going their separate ways. Minutes later, Langley appeared in the frame, watching her leave. He pulled out his phone, made a brief call, then smirked. "Langley," Amanda whispered. "He saw us and called Jonathan right away." "That explains why he came down to the basement," Elijah reasoned. "He was already on to us." They resumed walking, now more cautious than ever. The docks loomed ahead, a labyrinth of warehouses and shipping containers, their breath fogged in the cold air as they moved silently between buildings, listening for any sign of pursuit. Amanda's phone rang, startling them both. The screen showed the same unknown number that had sent the photo of Diego. After exchanging a glance with Elijah, she answered but didn't speak. "I don't know what you think you found," came Jonathan Kavanaugh's smooth, controlled voice. "But I promise you, it won't matter when this is over." "It's already over, Jonathan," Amanda replied, hearing the tremor in her own voice despite her attempt to sound confident. "We have the ledger. We have the evidence. You can't bury the truth anymore." "Truth?" Jonathan laughed coldly. "Truth is whatever the powerful say it is. Always has been, always will be. Ask your friend Diego if you don't believe me. Oh wait, you can't." "If you've heard him, you'll what?" Jonathan interrupted. "Call the police? With what proof? A homeless man's wild claims and some ancient book that could easily be dismissed as a forgery? The Kavanaugh name means something in this city. Yours doesn't." The call ended abruptly, leaving Amanda shaking with rage and fear. Elijah placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "He's desperate," Elijah said. "That's good, it means we have him worried." They continued toward the meeting point, a warehouse at the far end of the dock complex. According to Diego's message, this was where they would meet Frank Banks, the investigative journalist. But now, neither was sure if they could trust that message. Meanwhile, in a different warehouse across the dock complex, Diego Martinez struggled against his restraints. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, but his gaze remained defiant as he stared at his captors. "They won't fall for it," he spat at the man looming over him, James Wilson, the head of security from the Silver Crest. "They're smarter than you think." Wilson delivered another backhanded slap across Diego's face. "Keep telling yourself that, kid. Meanwhile, your friend Amanda is walking right into our trap." Behind him, a burly man with a shaved head checked his watch impatiently. "They should have been at the meeting point by now. Maybe they're not coming." "They'll come," Wilson assured him. "They have nowhere else to go. And when they do—" He left the sentence unfinished, patting the gun holstered at his side. Diego's eyes widened in brief panic before he controlled his expression again. "You're all just shadows trying to block out the sun," he said, echoing words he'd heard Elijah speak once. "You can't stop what's coming," Wilson laughed and turned away. "Keep an eye on him," he instructed the other man. "I'm going to check in with the boss." Back at the Silver Crest, Jonathan Kavanaugh paced his office, phone pressed to his ear. "Dewey-o." Gala continued below, most guests unaware of the drama unfolding. Langley stood nearby, nervously adjusting his tie. "No sign of them yet," James reported through the phone. "But we have men at all the possible meeting points. They won't escape." "They better not," Jonathan hissed. "That ledger cannot get out. My father was a fool to keep it all these years." "Don't worry, sir. We'll find them, recover the ledger, and tie up all the loose ends permanently." After hanging up, Jonathan turned to Langley. "Get back downstairs. Keep the guests happy. If anyone asks, there was a minor kitchen incident, nothing to worry about." Langley nodded and hurried out, leaving Jonathan alone with his thoughts. He walked to the bar and poured himself a generous glass of scotch, downing it in one gulp. Then he opened a desk drawer and removed a small revolver, checking that it was loaded before tucking it into his jacket. Some matters required a personal touch. Amanda and Elijah had reached the perimeter of the warehouse where they were supposed to meet Diego and Frank Banks. No lights were visible inside, and the surrounding area seemed deserted. "I don't like this," Elijah murmured, surveying the building. "Too quiet." Amanda nodded in agreement. If this is where an investigative journalist is waiting for a major story, there should be some sign of activity. They circled the building, staying in the shadows, looking for any indication that Diego or Banks might be inside. Instead, they spotted two men with earpieces posted at the back entrance, trying to look inconspicuous and failing. "Kavanaugh's men," Elijah whispered. "Just as I thought, it's a trap." "So where's the real Diego?" Amanda asked. "And is there even a journalist involved at all?" Elijah considered for a moment. "The photo they sent. Did you notice anything about the background?" Amanda pulled out her phone, examining the image more carefully. "It's dark, but there's some kind of logo on the wall behind him. Can barely make it out." She zoomed in as much as the blurry image would allow. "Looks like Anderson Shipping." "There's an abandoned Anderson Shipping warehouse on the north side of the docks," Elijah said. "I used to own shares in the company before everything was taken from me." "You think that's where they're holding Diego?" Elijah nodded. "It would be like Jonathan to use something connected to my past. His father always had a twisted sense of irony." They retreated quietly, making their way toward the north side of the dock complex. The night had grown colder, and few workers were around in this industrial area at such a late hour. The silence was broken only by the distant sound of waves, lapping against the piers and the occasional horn of a boat out on the water. The Anderson Shipping warehouse loomed ahead of them, dark and seemingly abandoned. Unlike the previous building, this one showed no signs of surveillance or guards, which made Amanda even more suspicious. "This feels too easy," she whispered. "They're not expecting us here," Elijah replied. "They think we're heading to their trap." They found a side door with a rusty padlock that Elijah managed to break with a piece of rebar he found nearby. Years on the streets had taught him resourcefulness, if nothing else. The door creaked as they eased it open, both freezing at the sound. When no response came, they slipped inside. The warehouse was cavernous and dark, filled with abandoned shipping crates and forgotten equipment. Their footsteps echoed despite their attempts to move silently. "Diego?" Amanda called softly, her voice still carrying in the empty space. No answer came. They moved deeper into the warehouse, using their phone flashlights to navigate. In the center of the building was a small office with windows overlooking the main floor. Through the dusty glass, Amanda could make out a shape, someone sitting in a chair. "There!" she whispered, pointing. They approached cautiously, Elijah taking the lead. The office door was unlocked, another detail that raised Amanda's suspicions. Inside, Diego sat bound to a chair, head slumped forward. "Diego!" Amanda rushed. To his side, checking for a pulse. "He's alive. Diego, can you hear me?" Diego's eyes fluttered open. When he recognized Amanda, they widened in panic. "It's a trap," he croaked through split lips. "Get out! Now!" Too late. The lights suddenly blazed on, momentarily blinding them. The sound of multiple footsteps surrounded the office as armed men poured in from hidden positions throughout the warehouse. "Well, well," came a familiar voice. "I knew you'd figure it out eventually." Amanda blinked against the harsh light to see Jonathan Kavanaugh standing in the doorway, flanked by James Wilson and several security men. Jonathan held a gun pointed casually in their direction. "The ledger," he demanded, extending his free hand. "Give it to me now, and perhaps I'll only have one of you killed as an example to the others." Elijah stepped forward, placing himself between Jonathan and Amanda. "You're just like your father," he said, his voice steady despite the danger. "Always underestimating me." Jonathan's smile faltered slightly. "The ledger, old man. Now." Elijah slowly reached into his coat, but instead of the ledger, he pulled out something else, a small digital voice recorder. He pressed play, and Jonathan's voice filled the small office. "Truth is whatever the powerful say it is. Always has been, always will be." "What is this?" Jonathan demanded, his composure slipping. "Insurance," Elijah replied. "Every conversation, every threat, all recorded, and already uploaded to multiple secure locations. It was a bluff. They'd only recorded the one phone call, but Jonathan couldn't know that. His face darkened with fury. "Kill them," he ordered Wilson. "Kill them all." Wilson raised his gun, aiming first at Elijah. Amanda, acting on pure instinct, threw herself forward, knocking into Wilson just as he fired. The bullet went wide, shattering a window instead. Chaos erupted. Diego, who had been working on his restraints throughout the conversation, broke free and tackled one of the security men. Elijah dove for Jonathan, grappling for the gun. Amanda scrambled behind a desk as more shots rang out. Through the confusion, she saw Elijah and Jonathan struggling for control of the weapon. Despite his age, Elijah was surprisingly strong, fueled by decades of righteous anger. The gun went off. Both men froze. For a terrible moment, Amanda thought Elijah had been shot. Then Jonathan stumbled backward, a red stain spreading across his shoulder. He clutched at the wound, his face a mask of disbelief. The security men hesitated, unsure whether to continue the fight or attend to their boss. That moment of uncertainty was all they needed. "Run!" Elijah shouted, grabbing the ledger from where he'd hidden it in his coat. "Now!" They fled from the office, Diego limping but moving quickly despite his injuries. Behind them, Wilson was shouting orders, trying to reorganize his men while also tending to Jonathan. They burst out of the warehouse into the cold night air, running blindly into the maze of shipping containers and dock equipment. Somewhere behind them, they could hear pursuit, voices calling and footsteps pounding. "This way," Diego gasped, leading them toward a line of trucks parked near the dock entrance. "I have a friend who works here. He'll help us." They reached the trucks just as their pursuers emerged from the warehouse. Wilson spotted them immediately. "There they are!" he shouted, raising his gun. A shot rang out, the bullet pinging off metal near Amanda's head. She ducked instinctively, heart hammering in her chest. "Over here!" called an unfamiliar voice. A man in a dock worker's uniform waved frantically from the cab of a truck, engine already running. "Get in, quick." They climbed aboard as more shots flew around them. The driver, Diego's friend, threw the truck into gear and accelerated away from the docks, tires screeching on the pavement. "Thanks, Eddie," Diego said, collapsing into a seat, his face pale from pain and exhaustion. "Man, when you said you might need a quick getaway, I didn't think you meant from armed gunmen," Eddie replied, eyes wide in the rearview mirror. "What the hell have you gotten into?" "It's a long story," Amanda replied, still catching her breath. "But we have proof of something big, something that could bring down one of the most powerful families in the city." Eddie whistled low. "The Kavanaughs? Damn, you guys don't mess around." "Where can you take us?" Elijah asked, clutching the ledger to his chest. "I know a place," Eddie replied, navigating through side streets to avoid main roads where they might be spotted. "Friend of mine runs a motel outside the city. No questions asked, no IDs required." As the truck sped through the night, Amanda looked back at the receding lights of the city. Somewhere back there, Jonathan Kavanaugh was nursing a gunshot wound and plotting his next move. They had escaped for now, but she knew this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. Dawn broke over the city, pale light seeping through the thin curtains of the roadside motel where they had taken refuge. Amanda sat at a small table, laptop open before her, the precious ledger beside it. She had been working for hours, scanning pages and assembling evidence, fighting exhaustion with cheap coffee from the vending machine outside. Diego lay on one of the beds, his wounds cleaned and bandaged as best they could manage with a drugstore first aid kit. Eddie had left hours ago, promising to keep an eye on the situation in the city and warn them of any developments. Elijah stood by the window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the nearly empty parking lot. He had barely slept, keeping vigil while Amanda worked. "How's it coming?" he asked, his voice rough with fatigue. "Almost done," Amanda replied, rubbing her tired eyes. "I've scanned all the key pages from the ledger and compiled them with the other evidence, the original deed, the police reports Carl found, everything." "And you're sure this Frank Banks is legitimate? Not another trap?" Amanda nodded. "I did some research. He's been investigating the Kavanaughs for years, trying to prove their corruption. He's won awards for exposing similar cases of corporate fraud and racial discrimination. I still don't understand how they intercepted our communications with him," Diego said, wincing as he sat up on the bed. "They must have hacked your phone when they had you," Amanda suggested. "Set up the fake meeting to ambush us while making us think we were meeting Banks." "So what now?" Elijah asked, moving away from the window to sit across from Amanda. "We can't trust any electronic communication." Amanda typed a few more keystrokes, then sat back with a small smile of satisfaction. "We don't have to. I just uploaded everything to a secure server and sent access instructions to every major news outlet in the city, including Frank Banks." "You what?" Diego exclaimed, sitting up too quickly and grimacing in pain. "It's the only way," Amanda explained. "If the information is everywhere, they can't suppress it. Too many people will have seen it." Elijah's weathered face broke into a slow smile, the first genuine one Amanda had seen from him. "Clever, very clever." "That's not all," Amanda continued, turning her laptop to show them a social media page. "I created accounts detailing everything that's happened, the history of the hotel, Bennett Kavanaugh's fraud, your imprisonment, all of it. It's already being shared hundreds of times." Diego checked his phone. "It's trending. Justice for Elijah is picking up steam." "The gala," Elijah said suddenly. "It's still going on today." Amanda nodded. "The main event is tonight. All the city's elite will be there. Politicians, business leaders, media." "The perfect stage," Elijah mused, a gleam in his eye. "You can't be serious," Diego protested. "Going back there would be suicide. They'll be looking for us everywhere." "Not everywhere," Amanda countered, an idea forming. "The hotel will be packed with guests, staff, and media. We could use that as cover." "It's too dangerous," Diego insisted. "Maybe not," Elijah said slowly. Jonathan was shot. He'll need medical attention. That will distract him, and he can't alert the authorities without explaining how he got shot. And the evidence is already public, Amanda added. They can't stop it from spreading now. Diego still looked unconvinced, but he was outnumbered. So what's the plan? He finally asked. We need to get inside that gala, Amanda said. Make sure everyone there sees the truth about the Kavanaugh family legacy. They spent the day preparing. Amanda continued to monitor the online spread of their evidence, pleased to see it gaining traction. Several journalists, including Frank Banks, had reached out through the secure channel she'd established, asking for more information and verification. Elijah made calls to old contacts, people who had known him before his fall, who might still remember the man he had been. Most numbers were disconnected, most names forgotten. But a few responded, shocked to hear from a man many believed was dead. Martha Reynolds, Elijah said after one such call, his voice thick with emotion. She was my secretary back in the day. She's agreed to help us. Can she be trusted? Diego asked, still wary after their recent betrayal. With my life, Elijah confirmed. She tried to testify in my defense during the trial, but they blocked her. She's been waiting for this day almost as long as I have. By late afternoon, they had cobbled together a plan. Martha would meet them near the hotel with credentials and appropriate clothing. As a respected business consultant now, she had an invitation to the gala and could arrange for additional passes. What about Jonathan? Diego asked. He'll recognize us immediately. Not if we're careful, Amanda replied. And remember, he's injured. He might not even be there. As evening approached, they left the motel and took a series of buses and taxis to avoid being tracked, eventually meeting Martha at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the Silver Crest. Martha Reynolds was in her 70s now, her hair silver and styled elegantly, her posture still ramrod straight. When she saw Elijah, her composed facade cracked briefly, tears welling in her eyes. Elijah, she said, embracing him tightly. All these years, I never stopped believing in you. Thank you, Martha, Elijah replied, returning the embrace. For everything. Martha quickly regained her professional demeanor, handing them each a small envelope. Your credentials for tonight. Amanda, there's a dress in the back of my car that should fit you. Diego, a suit that I hope is your size. Elijah? She paused, a smile touching her lips. I saved something special for you. From a garment bag, she withdrew a beautifully tailored tuxedo. It's not exactly the same as the one you wore to the hotel's grand opening in 1976, but close enough. Elijah touched the fabric reverently. Martha, I don't know what to say. Say, you'll finally get justice, she replied firmly. That's all the thanks I need. They changed at Martha's nearby apartment, transforming from fugitives into gala attendees. The effect was startling. Amanda barely recognized herself in the elegant black dress and subtle makeup Martha had provided. Diego looked distinguished, in a well-fitted suit despite his bruises, which Martha had skillfully concealed with makeup. But the most dramatic transformation was Elijah's. Dressed in the tuxedo, his beard trimmed and hair combed back, he no longer resembled the homeless man who had been thrown out of the Silver Crest. He stood tall, dignified, a glimpse of the successful businessman he had once been, and perhaps could be again. Remember, Martha instructed as they prepared to leave. I'll introduce you as business associates from out of town. Amanda, you're my assistant. Diego, you're a potential investor. Elijah. She hesitated. I'll be myself. Elijah said firmly. No more hiding. Martha nodded in understanding. The ledger? Safe, Amanda assured her, patting her clutch bag where she had hidden a flash drive containing all their evidence. And already spreading online. They arrived at the Silver Crest as the gala was in full swing. Limousines lined the circular drive, disgorging elegantly dressed guests who filed up the steps into the brightly lit lobby. Security was visible but discreet, checking invitations at the door. Martha led them confidently past the security check, her impeccable reputation earning them barely a second glance. Inside, the hotel had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crowd, while elaborate floral arrangements adorned every surface. A string quartet played softly in one corner, nearly drowned out by the murmur of conversation, and occasional bursts of laughter. "No sign of Jonathan," Diego murmured, scanning the room as they accepted champagne from a passing waiter. "He'll be here," Elijah predicted. He wouldn't miss his moment of glory, injured or not. They circulated cautiously through the crowd, Martha smoothly introducing them to various guests. No one recognized Elijah. Decades on the street had changed. His appearance enough that even old acquaintances saw only a distinguished older gentleman, not the man they had once known. Amanda kept one eye on her phone, monitoring the spread of their evidence online. "It's exploding," she whispered to Elijah. "Major news sites are picking it up. Barge or Kavanaugh corruption is trending nationally now." As if on cue, several guests around them began checking their phones, their expressions changing from curiosity to shock as they encountered the growing scandal. Whispers spread through the ballroom, heads turning, fingers pointing discreetly at various Kavanaugh family portraits adorning the walls. Then a hush fell over the crowd, as Jonathan Kavanaugh himself appeared at the top of the grand staircase. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his arm in a sling, explained away no doubt as a minor accident. His face was pale but composed as he descended to join his guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice carrying across the now quiet ballroom. "Welcome to the annual Silvercrest Gala, celebrating my family's legacy of excellence and service to this community." Polite applause followed, though Amanda noticed it was less enthusiastic than might have been expected. More guests were checking their phones, their expressions growing troubled. "For 3 generations," Jonathan continued, "the Kavanaugh family has prided itself on integrity and vision. This hotel stands as a testament to that legacy. A legacy of theft and racial discrimination," a voice interrupted. Not Elijah's or Amanda's, but Frank Banks's, the investigative journalist. He stood near the bar, digital tablet in hand. "A legacy built on stolen dreams and falsified documents." Jonathan's smile froze. "Mr. Banks, always a pleasure. But perhaps we could save your creative interpretations for another time?" "This isn't interpretation," Banks countered, holding up his tablet. "It's documentation, your father's own records, detailing how he framed and imprisoned his black business partner to steal this hotel." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jonathan's face darkened. "Security," he called sharply. "Please escort Mr. Banks out. He's clearly had too much to drink." 2 security guards moved toward Banks, but hesitated as several guests, including a state senator and the city's deputy mayor, stepped between them. "I'd like to hear what he has to say," the senator said, her voice carrying authority that made the guards pause. Jonathan's composure began to crack. "This is absurd. These are clearly falsified documents, probably created by competitors trying to damage my family's reputation." "They're real, Jonathan," the voice came from behind him. Jonathan whirled to find Elijah standing there, no longer hiding in the shadows but standing proudly in the center of the ballroom. A collective gasp went up as several of the older guests recognized him. "Elijah Carter," someone whispered, the name spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "Impossible," Jonathan sputtered. "You're the rightful co-owner of this hotel," Elijah finished for him. "The man your father framed, imprisoned, and tried to erase from history." The ballroom erupted in confused conversation. Jonathan tried to regain control, raising his voice over the din. "This man is a delusional vagrant who has been harassing my staff for days. Security, remove him immediately." The security guards moved forward, but again hesitated as Frank Banks called out, "Before you do that, you might want to check your phones. The full story is breaking on every news outlet in the city." All around the ballroom, phones were lighting up with notifications. Guests who had been uncertain now looked at Jonathan with growing suspicion and, in some cases, disgust. "The ledger doesn't lie, Jonathan," Elijah said, stepping closer. "Your father wrote it all down. Every bribe, every falsified document, every step of his plan to steal what we built together." Jonathan's face contorted with fury. You think anyone will believe you? A homeless black man against the Kavanaugh family? This city belongs to people like us. The words spoken in anger only confirmed what the evidence suggested. More guests began to edge away from Jonathan, distancing themselves from the growing scandal. Amanda stepped forward, joining Elijah. It's over, Jonathan. The truth is out. As if to confirm her words, the ballroom doors burst open. FBI agents in suits entered, led by a grim-faced woman who headed straight for Jonathan. Jonathan Kavanaugh, she announced formally. I'm Special Agent Harrison. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder. This is outrageous, Jonathan spluttered. I demand to speak to my lawyer. You'll have that opportunity, Agent Harrison assured him coolly. After we process you. As the agents led Jonathan away, the gala dissolved into chaos. Media who had been covering the event now rushed to capture the arrest. Guests either fled, not wanting to be associated with the scandal, or clustered in groups, eagerly discussing the dramatic turn of events. Amanda found herself standing beside Elijah, watching the scene unfold. How does it feel? She asked quietly. Elijah's eyes were fixed on the Kavanaugh family portrait hanging above the main staircase. Like waking up from a very long nightmare, he replied. But it's not over yet. He was right. This was just the beginning. The arrest would make headlines, but the legal battle to reclaim what was rightfully his would be long and complex. Still, for the first time in decades, Elijah Carter stood in the hotel he had helped create, not as an intruder, but as its rightful owner. Outside the Silver Crest, a crowd had gathered as news of the scandal spread. People held up phones showing images of the original deed with Elijah's name, clips from news reports about the corrupt Kavanaugh empire, and signs hastily made demanding justice. As Jonathan was led to a waiting FBI vehicle, the crowd parted to reveal a surprising sight. Dozens of elderly black residents from the city, some in wheelchairs, some leaning on canes. They stood in silent testimony, many holding old photographs of businesses they had once owned in the same neighborhood as the Silver Crest. They came, Martha said, appearing at Elijah's side. I called them this afternoon. Survivors, like you. People who lost everything to the Kavanaughs, and others like them. Elijah's stoic composure finally broke as he looked at the faces of those who, like him, had endured decades of injustice. Tears tracked silently down his weathered cheeks. In that moment, standing framed in the doorway of the Silver Crest, Elijah Carter became more than just a man reclaiming his property. He became a symbol of resistance against decades of systematic theft and discrimination, a living embodiment of the truth that had been buried for too long. The dynasty built on lies was finally beginning to crumble. The hours following Jonathan Kavanaugh's arrest were a blur of flashing cameras, shouted questions, and hastily arranged interviews. Elijah, Amanda, and Diego had been whisked away by FBI agents to give formal statements, their testimony crucial to building the case against the Kavanaugh empire. Now, well past midnight, they sat in a quiet conference room at the local FBI. Field office exhaustion etched on their faces. You should all get some rest, Special Agent Harrison advised, closing the folder containing their statements. We'll have agents stationed outside your hotel rooms for protection. What about Jonathan? Amanda asked. Is he still in custody? Harrison's expression tightened slightly. His lawyers are already working on bail arrangements. The Kavanaughs still have powerful friends despite tonight's events. So he could be released? Diego asked incredulously. Possibly by morning, Harrison confirmed. But don't worry, he'll be monitored. He's not going anywhere. Elijah, who had been quietly staring at his reflection in the conference room window, finally spoke. You don't know the Kavanaughs like I do. Money and power can make monitoring devices malfunction and records disappear. Harrison didn't argue. In her line of work, she'd seen enough to know Elijah's concerns weren't unfounded. What's our next move? Amanda asked Elijah as they were escorted to a nearby hotel, not the Silver Crest, but a modest establishment where they'd be less conspicuous. We need the ledger analyzed by forensic accountants, Elijah replied. And we need to find others, who might have documentation of the Kavanaugh's corruption. I can help with that, Diego offered. Now that the story's public, people might come forward who were afraid before. Despite the security outside their rooms, none of them slept well. Decades of injustice weren't erased by one night's victory, and they all knew the hardest part still lay ahead. Proving Elijah's claims in court against the formidable legal team the Kavanaughs would undoubtedly assemble. Morning arrived with news they'd feared. Jonathan Kavanaugh had indeed secured bail. His release was the top story on local stations, the cameras capturing his confident stride as he left the courthouse surrounded by expensive suits and practiced smiles. "My family has served this city for generations," he told the press, his injured arm now in a more substantial cast than the previous night's discreet sling. "These baseless accusations are nothing more than an attempt by competitors to tarnish our legacy. The truth will prevail." Amanda shut off the television in disgust. "He still believes he can talk his way out of this." "Because he usually can," Elijah replied, tying his shoes. He was dressed in clothes Martha had brought him, simple but dignified attire befitting the businessman he once was, rather than the homeless man he'd been forced to become. The Kavanaughs have been beating the system for decades. "But not this time," Diego insisted. "We have the ledger, the documents, witnesses. He can't escape all of that." Elijah's phone rang. Another gift from Martha, who'd insisted he needed to be reachable. Frank Banks was calling. "Elijah," the journalist said without preamble. "Jonathan's on the move. My source says he's called in his security team for some kind of operation. Whatever he's planning, it's happening fast." "Where is he?" Elijah asked, instantly alert. "Headed toward the docks. A private boat's being prepared." Elijah thanked him and hung up, quickly explaining to the others. "He's running, or planning something worse." "We need to tell the FBI," Amanda insisted, already reaching for her phone. "There's no time," Elijah countered. "By the time they mobilize and cut through red tape, Jonathan will be gone. We need to move now." "We can't just confront him ourselves," Diego protested. "The man tried to have us killed last night." "I'm not suggesting a confrontation," Elijah clarified. "Just surveillance. We follow, gather evidence of his escape attempt, and contact authorities when we know exactly where he is." Neither Amanda nor Diego looked convinced, but they recognized the determination in Elijah's eyes. After decades of waiting for justice, he wasn't about to let Jonathan slip away. They left immediately, evading their protective detail with surprising ease. Martha had arranged a car for them, a nondescript sedan that wouldn't attract attention. Diego drove, following Elijah's directions toward the docks where they'd confronted Jonathan the previous night. There, Amanda spotted it first, a sleek black SUV parked near a private marina. That's the same vehicle his security used before. They parked at a distance and continued on foot, keeping to the shadows of shipping containers and maintenance buildings. The morning was gray and overcast, a fine mist hanging in the air, limiting visibility, a blessing for their covert approach. As they drew closer to the marina, they could make out several figures standing beside the SUV. Jonathan was there, gesturing emphatically to James Wilson and two other security men. A sleek yacht was docked nearby, its engines already humming in preparation. "He's definitely running," Diego whispered. "We should call Agent Harrison now." Amanda was already dialing, but then something caught Elijah's attention. A second vehicle, pulling up, a white van with tinted windows. "Wait," he said, placing his hand over Amanda's phone. "Something else is happening." The van's side door slid open, and two burly men emerged, dragging a third figure between them. A man with a hood over his head, hands bound behind his back. "Oh my God," Amanda gasped. "They've got someone." Elijah's blood ran cold as he recognized the jacket the captive was wearing. It was Carl, the night janitor who had helped them. "They must have grabbed him after we separated," Diego said, his voice tight with anger. "He knows too much." "They're going to kill him," Elijah said with certainty. "Take him out on that boat and make sure he never testifies," Amanda finished, her call to Harrison, but her expression was grim as she hung up. "They're sending people, but it'll take at least 15 minutes for them to get here." "Carl doesn't have 15 minutes," Elijah said, his jaw set with determination. What are you suggesting? Diego asked, though he already knew the answer. A distraction, Elijah replied. Something to delay them until the FBI arrives. That's suicide, Amanda protested. There are at least 5 of them, all armed. I'm not planning to fight them, Elijah assured her. Just keep their attention while you two circle around and get Carl out of there. Before they could protest further, Elijah was moving, skirting around the edge of the dock to approach from a different angle than the one they'd been watching from. Amanda and Diego exchanged frustrated glances before beginning their own circuitous route toward the van. Near the yacht, Jonathan was checking his watch impatiently. Let's move, he ordered. Get him on board and let's go. I want to be in international waters by noon. Wilson and his men began marching the hooded Carl toward the gangplank, while Jonathan made a final call on his phone. It's done, he said to whoever was on the other end. The old man and his friends won't be a problem after today. Make sure those records are destroyed before going somewhere, Jonathan? The voice seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, amplified by the dock's acoustics. Jonathan spun around, searching for its source. Elijah stepped out from behind a stack of crates, about 30 yards away, far enough to be out of immediate reach, close enough to be heard clearly. You, Jonathan snarled. I should have known. You'd turn up like a bad penny. One last chance, Jonathan, Elijah called, his deep voice carrying across the dock. Let Carl go. Turn yourself in. Make this right. Jonathan laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Make it right? You think a few nights in a luxury prison before my lawyers get me out is right, after what my father did to you? No, old man. If you want justice, come and take it. He nodded to Wilson, who drew his gun and aimed it at Elijah. I wouldn't do that, Elijah warned. Not with so many witnesses. What witnesses? Jonathan sneered, gesturing to the empty dock. The ones watching. This live stream. Elijah held up his phone, the camera facing Jonathan and his men. Everything you've said and done in the last 5 minutes is being broadcast live to thousands of viewers, including the FBI. It was a bluff. He hadn't actually started streaming. But Jonathan couldn't know that. His face contorted with rage as he stalked toward Elijah. Give me that phone, he demanded, reaching with his good arm. Elijah backed away, continuing to hold the phone up as if recording. Touch me, and you add assault to your growing list of charges. Jonathan halted, suddenly uncertain. Behind him, Wilson still had his gun trained on Elijah, waiting for orders. Shoot him, Jonathan finally said. We'll say he attacked us. Self-defense. Wilson hesitated. Sir, if he's really streaming, I said shoot him. A gunshot cracked through the misty, morning air. Everyone froze. But it wasn't Wilson who had fired. At the far end of the dock, Amanda stood with a flare gun pointed skyward, the emergency flare climbing high above them before bursting in a shower of bright red sparks visible for miles. In the momentary distraction, Diego had managed to reach the van and free Carl, cutting his restraints with a pocket knife and pulling off the hood. They now stood near the marina entrance, Carl disoriented but alive. Jonathan, realizing his plans were unraveling, made a desperate lunge at Elijah. Despite his age, Elijah sidestepped smoothly, causing Jonathan to stumble past him. It's over, Jonathan, Elijah said calmly. It's not over until I say it's over, Jonathan shouted, turning back to face Elijah. He pulled a small revolver from inside his jacket, the same one he'd taken from his desk the night before. Several things happened at once. Wilson shouted, Mr. Kavanaugh, don't! Amanda screamed Elijah's name, and the sound of sirens filled the air as police cars and FBI vehicles swarmed the entrance to the docks, responding to both Amanda's earlier call and the flare that had drawn attention from every emergency service in the vicinity. Jonathan's hand wavered, the gun shifting between Elijah and the approaching authorities. You ruined everything, he hissed at Elijah. It should have been ours. My father earned it. Earned it? Elijah's voice was steady despite the gun pointed at him. Your father stole it, Jonathan. He stole my life. He made it better than you ever could have. Jonathan's control was slipping, his voice rising hysterically. He built an empire. On stolen dreams, Elijah replied. And now it's crumbling, just like everything built on lies eventually must. Jonathan's face twisted with rage. He raised the gun, aiming directly at Elijah's heart. A shot rang out. Jonathan staggered backward, a look of shock on his face. But he wasn't hit. One of his own security men, not Wilson, but another, had fired, the bullet striking Jonathan's revolver and knocking it from his hand. "Enough," the security guard said firmly. "I didn't sign up for murder." Before Jonathan could react, FBI agents swarmed the dock, weapons drawn. Agent Harrison led the charge, immediately securing Jonathan while other agents detained Wilson and the remaining security personnel. "Elijah Carter," Harrison called. "Are you all right?" Elijah nodded, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally catching up with him. He felt suddenly tired, not just from the morning's events, but from the weight of decades fighting for this moment. Amanda and Diego rushed to his side, supporting him as his knees threatened to buckle. "You did it," Amanda said, tears in her eyes. "It's really over." Elijah watched as agents led Jonathan away in handcuffs, the fallen hotel magnate still shouting threats and promises of legal retribution. But his words now sounded hollow, the desperate protests of a man who knew his dynasty was finished. "Looks like I own this place after all," Elijah murmured, a hint of his old spirit returning as he met Jonathan's furious gaze one last time. 3 months later, the grand ballroom of the Silver Crest Hotel was packed once again. But this time, the crowd gathered for a very different purpose. The room had been transformed, the ostentatious Kavanaugh family portraits replaced with photographs and newspaper clippings documenting the real history of the hotel and the community it had once displaced. Elijah stood at the podium, looking out over the assembled guests. He wore a tailored suit that fit him perfectly, no longer a costume to help him blend in, but a reflection of his restored status. At 73, he stood straight and proud, the years of homelessness beginning to fade from his appearance, though not from his memory. "Today is not just about the reopening of this hotel under its rightful ownership," he began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the room. "It's about acknowledging a history that was deliberately erased and beginning the work of making amends." The courtroom battle had been shorter than anyone expected. Once the FBI began investigating, they'd uncovered far more than just the fraud against Elijah. The Kavanaugh empire was revealed to be built on decades of corruption, bribery, and racial discrimination. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Jonathan had accepted a plea deal that included substantial prison time and the forfeiture of numerous properties, including the Silver Crest. Proving Elijah's ownership had been surprisingly straightforward with the original deed, Bennett Kavanaugh's ledger, and testimony from former employees like Martha Reynolds. The court had awarded him not just ownership of the hotel, but substantial damages for his wrongful imprisonment and the theft of his property. "The journey from that rainy night when I first walked back into this lobby to today has been remarkable," Elijah continued. "But I didn't walk it alone." He gestured to the front row, where Amanda, Diego, and Carl sat alongside Martha Reynolds and Frank Banks. All had played crucial roles, not just in exposing the truth, but in helping Elijah navigate the complex legal and business challenges of reclaiming his legacy. "Some of you have asked why I wanted this hotel back," Elijah said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "After all, I could have taken the settlement money and lived comfortably anywhere. Why fight for a building that was the symbol of so much pain?" The room grew quiet, everyone leaning forward slightly to hear his answer. "Because this was never just about a building," Elijah explained. "It was about the principle that no one should be able to steal another person's dream and get away with it. It was about showing that justice, though delayed, can still come. And most importantly, it was about creating something meaningful from the ashes of that injustice." He gestured to the renovation plans displayed on easels around the ballroom, blueprints for the new Silver Crest that would include a museum documenting the history of Black entrepreneurship in the city, a community center offering business education and legal support for minority owners, and a foundation to help those wrongfully convicted rebuild their lives after prison. "The Kavanaughs saw this hotel as a monument to their wealth and power," Elijah said. "I see it as a platform for lifting others up, for telling stories that were silenced, and for creating opportunities that were denied to so many. In the weeks following Jonathan's arrest, others had come forward with similar stories of being forced out of businesses or homes by the Kavanaughs and other powerful families. Many had lost everything and never recovered. Elijah had reached out to each one, offering legal support from a team of attorneys who'd agreed to work pro bono on such cases. Today, we don't just celebrate one man getting his property back, Elijah continued. We celebrate the beginning of a movement to address historical wrongs and create a more equitable future. Among the crowd were faces both familiar and new, city officials who'd quickly distanced themselves from the Kavanaughs once the scandal broke, community activists who'd been fighting similar battles for years, and most movingly, elderly black residents who remembered when Elijah Carter had been a rising star in the business world before his fall. One of them, a woman in her 80s who'd once owned a thriving restaurant near the hotel, called out from the audience, "We never believed what they said about you, Elijah. We knew the truth." Elijah's composure cracked slightly, emotion visible on his face before he collected himself. "Thank you, Margaret. Your faith means more than you know." Amanda, now formally employed as the hotel's community outreach director, watched Elijah with pride. The past 3 months had been intense as they'd worked to transform the hotel's operations, culture, and reputation. The staff had been retained, but retrained, with an emphasis on dignity and respect for all guests, regardless of appearance or background. Mr. Langley had been one of the few employees who didn't survive the transition. He'd been dismissed immediately, his condescending attitude towards staff and guests deemed incompatible with the new Silver Crest. He was currently facing his own legal troubles, having been implicated in some of Jonathan's schemes. As Elijah concluded his remarks, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. He stepped back from the podium, momentarily overwhelmed by the journey that had brought him here, from a cold sidewalk to the stage of the hotel he'd helped conceive nearly 5 decades earlier. The celebration continued well into the evening, with tours of the renovated spaces and presentations on the community programs that would soon launch. Throughout it all, Elijah moved through the crowd with grace, shaking hands and sharing stories, no longer invisible as he had been for so many years. Later, as the event wound down, Amanda found Elijah standing alone in the lobby, gazing up at the new sign that had replaced the old Silver Crest logo. The new design incorporated elements of African and African American art alongside modern architectural motifs, a visual representation of the blending of cultures and histories the hotel now celebrated. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, joining him. "Just thinking about all the nights I spent looking at this building from the outside," Elijah replied, wondering if I'd ever see justice. "And now you're on the inside, changing it for the better." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "There's still so much to do. The Kavanaughs weren't the only ones who built fortunes by pushing others down. But you've started something important," Amanda said. "People are paying attention now. Other companies are being scrutinized. Other historical wrongs are being examined. Thanks to you," Elijah said, turning to face her. "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't believed me that first night." Amanda smiled. "I just recognized the truth when I heard it. The rest was all you." After completing her MBA, which Elijah had insisted on paying for, Amanda had been offered prestigious positions at several major corporations. To everyone's surprise, she'd turned them all down to continue working with Elijah on transforming the Silver Crest into a center for community empowerment and historical reconciliation. Diego had taken a different path, accepting a journalism scholarship to document stories like Elijah's, cases where systemic racism had been weaponized through the legal system to strip Black Americans of their property and opportunities. His first series of articles had already won awards and sparked investigations in 3 states. Carl had retired from his janitor position, but remained connected to the hotel as a community elder and unofficial historian, his decades of quiet observation now valued as he helped piece together the true history of the property and its impact on the surrounding neighborhoods. "Do you regret anything?" Amanda asked Elijah as they watched the last guests departing. Elijah considered the question carefully before answering. "Only that it took this long," he finally said. "But now they'll never forget The following morning, Elijah arrived early at the hotel, before any staff or guests. He walked through the quiet lobby, ran his fingers along the reception desk, and then took the elevator to the top floor, to the office that had once belonged to Bennett and then Jonathan Kavanaugh. Now it was his. The space had been completely redesigned, the ostentatious furniture replaced with pieces that were elegant but understated. The walls, once covered with hunting trophies and family portraits, now displayed photographs of the neighborhood as it had been in the 1970s, when Elijah and Bennett had first purchased the land. Elijah sat behind the desk and opened a drawer, removing the original deed to the property, the same document he'd carried in his sack for decades, now professionally preserved and framed. He placed it on the wall where the Kavanaugh family portrait had once hung. Below it, he added a new plaque with a simple inscription: "Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be denied." This hotel stands as a testament to the power of truth and the importance of perseverance. As the morning sun streamed through the windows illuminating the words, Elijah Carter smiled. After 30 years of waiting, he was finally home. Some legacies are written in marble and gold, others in patience and unwavering truth. If you found Elijah Carter's journey compelling, like this video and subscribe for more stories of redemption, justice, and untold histories.